Maathio is an international speaker who helps governments, investors, and multinationals and regulators around the world to innovate and build and lead the future. Maathio's recent work includes mentoring X-Prize teams, reimagination global education and training with the G20, and helping the world's largest organization to envision, ideate the future and the products, services, industries, and even countries. Please, a warm welcome for Maathio Gurvin.
I have to remember to turn the mic on, and I can finally take the mask off. That's it. I must admit, I do not like wearing masks. That's it, but it is part of our global society at the moment. So, I don't think that's the presentation. How are you all anyway? So it's actually nice to just be able to be in the same place, let alone anything else. I've always liked the colour green. They had it working earlier. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be talking you through the future of work and the workplace, because there's obviously a huge amount of debate around the topic. There was a lot of debate around the topic before COVID. There's even more debate during the pandemic, and there'll be more debate after the pandemic. So, let's see. Here we go. So it's no secret that the pandemic forced everybody to change how they work. So, for example, this is the second time I've been on a stage this year. In 2019, I was in 60 different countries, having lots of different conversations about lots of different things with lots of different interesting people. And for about the past 18 months, I've been working from a virtual studio. So it's actually nice to be in an environment where I'm not surrounded by green screens. So my own work was disrupted significantly. But when I actually set up the 311 Institute and the World Futures Forum, I set them up with the future in mind anyway. And I set them up along the lines of what we're sort of going to be having conversations about today. So get ready for exponential change. So I'm going to be taking you through how things are changing. I'm going to be taking you through a lot of the high-level concepts that affect the future of work. And I'm going to be showing you things that you probably haven't seen before. And I'm going to be showing you both the threats and the opportunities. Now, when we talk about the future of work, this is my starburst. You can download it from the website. I track over 450 exponential technologies. Now, a lot of people focus on one individual technology, for example, artificial intelligence, particularly as it relates to work. However, you wouldn't be able to have artificial intelligence if you didn't have increasingly powerful computer systems. You wouldn't be able to have artificial intelligence if you didn't have increasingly powerful general processor units. You wouldn't be able to have powerful artificial intelligence if you didn't have neural networks or shallow neural networks. And then when we have a look at the future of work, increasingly we can decentralize and dislocate everything because we have increasingly powerful mobile networks. If you tried working from home, basically without a fast internet connection, yeah, you could have the best artificial intelligence, the best automated systems, the best computing systems and everything else. But if all these things don't actually come together, you end up with innovations that are practically useless. Now, when we actually have a look at how we combine all of these different exponential technologies together, not only do they change everything about the world of work, they change everything about every single part of global culture, business, and society. And I'm not really going to go into it because there's obviously lots, but we've got technologies here. For example, we were just talking about bioreactors. Bioreactors solve global famine. So each individual technology on this radar can either change one industry or absolutely everything. But when we have a look at them, we've got new computing technologies coming through. So I do a lot of work with organizations like ARM, where we kind of look to 2030. Connectivity, we've got 5G coming through now, so that's 1.5 gigabits a second. We've got 6G already being proofed in the labs. That's terabit speeds. Fun fact, 6G, when we talk about the future of work, enables brain to brain, so human to human, telepathic communication, which is already a thing that we did about 2 to 3 years ago. So everything that you think of as science fiction, I already have videos for it. We have new electronics, new energy systems. When we have a look at artificial intelligence, for example, today artificial intelligence is either binary, so machine learning, or it's deep learning networks, but we've created artificial intelligences out of DNA, and we've also 3D printed artificial intelligences. So there is nothing on this starburst that isn't changing. And then when we have a look at security and user experiences, we have augmented reality, virtual reality, neural interfaces, and all kinds of different things. So the general message here is, don't think about individual technologies, think how you can combine different technologies together to create a new product or service or change the status quo to do something new. Now, one of the things basically that we think of as humans is typically that we are special. And we are. Every single one of us has a potential within us, but trying to unlock it is sometimes difficult. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this slide is to try to change your mindset. Most technologies that we have today are what we call exponential technologies. So if you step back to 1976, you can walk around a stage, that's good. In 1976, the cost per megapixel for a digital camera was about $7.2 million. How many of you are going to pay $7.2 million for a 1 megapixel smartphone camera today? None of you, right? Today, or in 2019, that's 0.041. Samsung have just created a 200 megapixel camera. So what you can see is this guy, he worked for Kodak. He got laughed out of the room because he went, I have a way to digitize photos. They laughed him out of the room, they went bust. Kodak invented the digital camera. But because they didn't see the potential in this particular technology, because they thought it's rubbish today, it'll be rubbish tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after, the board dismissed him, and now we are taking trillions of photos a day. We have exactly the same basically with computing. So this is actually the world's first transistor. There isn't really a price for it. But the world's first transistor was 3 inches big, whereas now you can fit 7 billion transistors onto the Intel i9. And the cost per transistor, again, is basically nothing. But also the size. So the counts have increased, the sizes have decreased, the speed has increased. So the cost performance of these technologies has increased substantially. And this is with current technology. So these increases in cost and performance are with humans doing the innovating. But today, we have creative machines. So it has always been assumed that the one thing that you cannot automate is human creativity, innovation, research and development, and all that kind of stuff. You can, because innovation is a process. Go and have a conversation with any innovation company, and they will go, we have a process for innovation. If you have a process, you can break the process down into tasks. If you can break it into tasks, you can turn it into algorithms. You can turn those algorithms into artificial intelligence models. You can automate the thing. So today, we have creative machines that are iterative. And those creative machines, those artificial intelligence innovators, are designing the A330neo with Airbus. They designed over 30,000 new drugs in 21 days. That's impossible 5 years ago. They've designed new lunar rovers, which is this one here. So this is 30% lighter than any lunar rover on the planet. 30% lighter also means you use 30% less material, which actually helps you with your ESG goals and sustainability goals, but that's a different conversation. They also designed Under Armour trainers. Amazon, they're designing clothes. And actually the computer chip, Google has an artificial intelligence that is designing artificial intelligence computer chips, and it's doing it a lot faster than humans have historically. In fact, it's 99% faster. So when we start talking about the future of work, so work, creativity, innovation, and everything else, this is a world first. It came out recently, Davos. So in South Africa, and there's a lot of debate over whether or not you can credit artificial intelligence basically with the invention of a new product. the South African Patent Office awarded Dabus, an artificial intelligence, the world's first patent. And as it says here, Dabus, the invention was autonomously generated by an artificial intelligence. This is a good thing and it's a bad thing. Overall, though, it's net positive, because if you have a look at COVID, traditionally it would have taken us about 5 to 10 years to create a vaccine. Using advanced artificial intelligence, supercomputers, genome sequencing and all kinds of other things, we were able to actually create the vaccine in 3 months. What slowed us down was the fact that we had to do human trials for 6 months, and we're trying to reduce the speed, or trying to increase the speed of human trials by turning people into digital clones of themselves. And we test vaccines on the digital avatars at digital speed. Every industry is being disrupted. So when we have a look at agriculture, we've got vertical farms. I can take the stem cells from a chicken, put it into a bioreactor, and I can provide you all with clean meat ad infinitum without ever having to kill an animal. Energy. Over 1 trillion watts of renewable energy installed. We're weaning ourselves off oil and gas. Financial services industry. We have robo-wealth advisors. We have the rise of fintechs and what we call decentralized finance. So, for example, gaming platforms like Fortnite could actually be future banks, because they have over 200 million players and they actually have microfinance systems. Healthcare. We already have the technologies, courtesy of say CRISPR as a technology, that if you are born with an inherited genetic condition, I can put you onto an intravenous drip that has a gene editing tool in it, and half an hour later you no longer have the inherited genetic condition, because the gene editing tools go in, clip out the bad gene, clip in the right gene, you're cured. That cures over 6,000 inherited genetic conditions. And then when we have a look at, and that's just the start there, when we have a look at transportation, it's all going autonomous and electrified. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this basically is from a future of work and workplace perspective. How many of your citizens are trained in next generation gene sequencing, gene editing technologies and tools? How many of you are actually farmers? These are being rolled out in the Middle East. That first technology there means that you no longer have to import meat or vegetables or fruit. So this turns you, this particular technology, basically from a Middle Eastern perspective, turns you into a net exporter of food. And that's just that one. Then you can do this in the construction industry. Even when we actually have a look at the construction industry, you can 3D print a building over there, but you can 3D print a building 90% faster than you can build a traditional building, and for about 90 to 95% less cost. In Europe, we have people living in these buildings and everything else. You can actually 3D print them out of materials that are carbon negative, that suck carbon out of the air. So these are now carbon negative buildings. In addition to that, I sort of walked basically up to the WTC yesterday. I saw this building with huge numbers of air conditioning units strapped to the side of it, if you've sort of seen it. And I also have technologies, basically courtesy of Stanford University, that will allow you to create zero energy air conditioning. You put something that looks like a solar panel on the top of your roof, it uses no electricity, no energy whatsoever. It beams heat into space, and it keeps your buildings cool at 74 degrees. That's just another technology. Now, when we actually have a look at future operating models, because to understand the future of work, you need to understand future operating models. We've got the gig economy. 30% of people generally in the West, but also Middle East increasingly, are actually part of this gig economy. We have flash organizations. So flash organizations basically is really a sort of theoretical and slightly conceptual business operating model, where, for example, all of you in the audience have lots and lots of different skills. Now, I as an entrepreneur or I as a businessman might want to tap into that. Now, I can hire gig economy workers, but if I use something like a blockchain-based technology, I might be able to bring you all in, depending on your individual skills, to do this one particular task. I bring you in, I check all your credentials and certifications, the quality of your work and everything else, because it's all stuck onto the blockchain. And once I've done my task, it could be a project, whatever it happens to be, we all disband. Now, bearing in mind 30% of people are already in the gig economy, bearing in mind that we also see automation coming through in the future of work, we're actually seeing more and more young people having not one job, but they have 3 or 4, but they don't really have a full-time job. You know, they're in this and this and this and this. So this plays into this. Holocratic organizations, this is where everybody is treated the same in terms of rank. There is no rank. There is no CEO. There is no inside sales guy. Now, holocratic organizations, we have organizations like Zappa that use these. They typically seem to be doing okay. However, when we start having a look at the future of organizations, holocracy comes back. We also have the rise of algorithmic, what I call algorithmic organizations. Now, this is where, for example, increasingly we use artificial intelligence to find you as an individual to fill a job. I use artificial intelligence to vet you. I use artificial intelligence during the interview process, and then I use artificial intelligence to hire you. I use artificial intelligence to manage you. So this has actually already gone to court, basically. So companies like Amazon and Uber have actually been taken to the European Court of Justice, for example, because they are increasingly using artificial intelligence to monitor people, and those AIs are increasingly managing people. And then if you're a gig economy worker, there's an artificial intelligence in Singapore that's managing 40,000 people. However, those AIs go one step further. They're being used to fire people. So with Uber, if you don't meet your particular KPIs or passenger expectations, you don't get fired by a human, you get fired by an artificial intelligence. We have artificial intelligence on the boards of finance companies over in Hong Kong, and then we have this. We have around 15 of these now, 15 fully autonomous organizations. There are no people in them whatsoever. If you think about, for example, Uber, what is Uber? You could automate all of Uber. It's a transaction system. I press a button on my phone. My phone knows where I am. The Uber system knows where I am. It knows where the cars are. It sends a car. The driver or the autonomous vehicle takes me from here to the airport. I pay automatically. Why do I need any people in Uber? And actually, Uber is increasingly automated. Amazon already also has the technologies to be the world's first fully autonomous retailer. Hedge funds in Wall Street are fully autonomous. Out of Hong Kong, fully autonomous. But there aren't many. But this is a thing. And if you're at the age of 10, like my kids are at the minute, and you see this kind of thing, what's your education system like? How do you cope with this? Do you have a universal basic income policy? Now, when we have a look at the future of work itself, there's all this talk basically of work from anywhere, okay? But there's a lot more to it than that. So on the one hand, we can work from anywhere. You can work from the office, and post-COVID, most people are going to be spending about 3 days in the office, 2 days out. That's if you have a look at the Fortune 250, so they're moving to a hybrid kind of working. But when we talk about work from home during COVID, it's not work from home, it's work from anywhere. I could actually be on the local beach, I could be at the top of a skyscraper, I could be on this stage, I could be doing work. It's work from anywhere. That's fundamental to the future, because actually it benefits you. Because you can be here in Bahrain, and you can be working anywhere on the planet. But you can increasingly be doing a variety of different and unexpected things. Oh, I did the wrong one. So you could also work anywhere. But you might think, well, hang on, you just said that. What I actually just said was you can work from anywhere. But you can work anywhere. And what I actually mean by that is you could be a surgeon here. And I'll show you some things in a minute. Now, when we talk about working from anywhere, you could go into new offices in new places. So with 5G means you can actually have dumb gadgets. Those are virtual reality that's a virtual reality headset. Glasses. We also have smart contact lenses and everything else. So when we look at the future of work today, you've all probably got your laptops with you and everything else. So why don't I just give you a pair of augmented reality glasses or virtual reality glasses? Because when you do that, I can do new things. You put on your glasses, not your giant headset. But these augmented reality and virtual reality interfaces can do all kinds of things. Now imagine boosting productivity if you have 3 screens. Imagine reducing the cost of your IT because you no longer need to buy monitors or laptops. Combine artificial intelligence with these types of systems and start adding in automation. You really start moving the dial. Productivity starts increasing. Bearing in mind we're increasingly collaborating in virtual reality or different systems. And in addition to that, if you really, really did want to go into an office still, what about going to this office? This is NVIDIA's office. It is a virtual reality duplicate of their head office in California down to the photon level. So when I say you can work anywhere, what I mean is if you want to be in your corporate office while you are on stage, we have the technology to do that. Okay? But this is just part of the overall picture of future of work. Because now you can work from anywhere, you can be anywhere, you can now work on anything, irrespective of where you are. So what if you were a surgeon in this location, but your patient was 3,500 miles away? Historically, you couldn't do anything for them. 5G and telerobotics.
We had a young woman with an acute heart attack. The total transfer time to get her to our hospital was 3 hours. There's a feeling of helplessness as a physician that you know what the treatment is to limit their chance of death, but you can't get to them.
Our hypothesis is that if we implement remote robotics in its full capacity, we will change the lives for hundreds of thousands of patients in the US and millions around the world.
Using technologies like 5G networks and robotic systems to provide cardiac care at a distance and be able to do telestenting has the potential to change the landscape of medicine. 5G technology really opens up the possibility to do these over longer distances with minimal delays in signal and transmitting greater amounts of data.
Being able to reach a patient hundreds of miles away to deliver the care they need when they need it is one of the most disruptive things happening in the medical industry.
So on the one hand, that technology allows me to be on stage while I'm actually conducting an operation on someone in Africa. It also saves 43 million lives because people die because they don't have access to advanced surgical procedures. And it also improves the lives of over 143 million people whose lives are affected because they don't have access to surgical intervention. We can apply these kind of teleoperations. Basically, for example, if you have a look at the UAE, they've got the Khalifa port, basically got DP World and all these kinds of things. We've got cruise ships and container ships that are going fully autonomous. You could be based here and using teleoperations, you could actually be remotely operating and controlling and looking after and managing and securing basically those cargo ships as they travel anywhere on the planet. In
South
addition
Korea
to that,
is
what about
aiming
construction?
to become one of the leading
Can I be
players
here
of the
and build
5G
something somewhere
industry,
else?
and it's already made a head start in employing smart manufacturing solutions using the technology to remotely control machinery on other continents. Here's Arirang's IT correspondent Oh Soo-young for more on our special series on 5G technology.
A 40-ton excavator at a construction site in Germany can be controlled from over 8,500 kilometers away in the South Korean
There's
city
no one
of
in the cab.
Incheon. Earlier this month, Korean construction giant Tusan became the first firm in the world to remotely control machines on the other side of the planet.
He's in Germany.
Running on-site operations through live video streaming, 3D machine guidance and real-time diagnostics doesn't just save time and money, but also enables remote handling in dangerous situations, such as the disposal of toxic materials.
So we talk about telehealth, teleoperations, telepsychiatry, all these kinds of things. Think tele-X. Because increasingly you can be based in Bahrain, but you can be performing surgeries on people in China. You could be building buildings in London from here. You could be controlling ships or a whole variety of different things as they come out of the port of Shanghai, basically, or Hamburg, or whatever it happens to be. We are decentralizing work in a whole variety of new ways, basically, and it is an advantage. Now, you can also work with anyone. Now, this is where platforms like Microsoft HoloLens, for example, actually digitize human presence. Because frankly, I can be working here, I can have a variety of different virtual team members anywhere else on the planet, but sometimes you want that kind of physical, people miss that kind of physical connection, particularly as we've sort of seen during COVID. Now, Microsoft kind of present these technologies basically as sort of augmented reality and mixed reality technologies. I see them more as digitizing human presence, because fundamentally I could have someone from India with me on the stage, I could have someone from Japan with me on the stage, and we can be talking as though we're actually together. So it's telepresence on steroids. In addition to that, these kinds of technologies, when you layer in universal translators and different artificial intelligences, I can be talking to them in a natural language. So I can talk English, but they can understand me if they're Chinese, or if they're Japanese, or if they are from Brazil, or whatever it happens to be. So with universal translators, we're breaking down the barriers as well. But this digitizes human presence, which then allows you to kind of bring that team back together.
Is a spark that gives our lives meaning. It drives us to seek out others who feel the same way.
It also allows you to create products in new ways, operate things in new ways.
Okay, why don't you input the data and we'll take a look together. Hey, Mari, what you got for me?
To find those who share our views, yet offer different perspectives.
Look over here.
Challenge us with new ways of seeing.
That I think we should
Deepen our understanding. And enrich our lives.
最后一笔的时候，往前。
Great things happen when we commit to something bigger than ourselves.
Take a closer look at it.
Place this here. Let's see how we go from there, okay?
This sense of collaboration and the feelings of connection it brings excites us.
Hey, just in time. I'm gonna move it slightly, okay?
It's yours, take it.
We have two planes right now on the same trajectory.
As we put people first, technology fades into the background and feels like anything but.
Aisha, what do you think?
I think we had 330, maintaining 2800. We'll be clear for approach.
Excellent.
This changes the way we see the world, and in turn, changes the world we see.
These numbers are looking great, actually.
There's promise in the possibilities, and what we see and create next will stretch the imagination.
Good morning, Sarah.
Morning.
Slowly coming towards the thumb.
A world without boundaries.
Good job. A lot better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Excellent. Slowly bring
A world where technology enhances, not limits, humanity. With people front, center, and in the spotlight. The future is here. And here can be anywhere. Introducing Microsoft Mesh.
So when I start bringing in other technologies like haptics, bearing in mind technology always starts off really big, really expensive and slow, and it gets better and smaller and everything else. If I bring in haptic technologies, I can high-five my teammates. Or if we look at the future of sports, I can rugby tackle them. Now, you can also work with anything. Now, this is where we start getting interesting. All of a sudden, I can work with an artificial
Hey, Watson.
intelligence.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
How are you different than artificial intelligence?
I share some elements with artificial intelligence, but there are key differences.
Like what?
I'm working to help people think better and make more informed decisions. Cognitive computing is about augmenting human intelligence, not replacing it.
So you're not trying to think for me?
No.
What's my favorite color?
I have no idea.
Favorite food?
Nope.
Do I prefer cats or dogs?
Cats?
Wrong. Neither. Trick question, Watson.
So this is where we start getting interesting. Well, I'll come to that in a moment.
Today, we're all being
What
disrupted.
about working with a digital
And I'm
human?
not just talking about by digital humans, like myself with our conversational artificial intelligence, state-of-the-art high-def rendering, and neural networks for brains.
So this is Anna. She is my digital human employee. I kind of employ her, kind of don't pay her. However, she wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for advanced artificial intelligence, which relies on advanced computing. High definition rendering, so when we actually look at rendering systems, rendering is becoming increasingly photorealistic. That changes things as well. Anna and her friend Cora, she has lots of digital friends. This is Cora. So Cora basically works for NatWest, which is a bank in the UK, and she manages customer inquiries because she uses natural language, which wouldn't have been possible 2 to 3 years ago. She uses high definition rendering, which wouldn't have been possible 2 to 3 years ago. Remember, technology is exponential. That's a key message here. She's also advising customers on loans, payments, mortgages, and she'll give you travel advice and everything else. Now, on the one hand, she replaces you. And she's replacing people in customer service, in Mercedes, as well as at banks and all kinds of other areas. She can also be your teammate. So you can increasingly say to her, well, Cora, I have a question about something that I need to do today. What do you think? So we're both being replaced by, but also collaborating with technology in new ways. Technology used to be this dumb prosthetic. Now increasingly it's our partner and our co-pilot. Now when we have a look at future skills, there's loads of these kinds of reports out saying 50% of all jobs are either fully automatable or partially automatable by the year 2030. And with a lot of these reports, they'll sort of give you these lists. So for example, customer services, basically we can replace 100% at the minute, let alone anything else. I can replace surgeons. I've got robo-surgeons basically coming through, basically with the US military, basically that are fully autonomous, and they will actually, we've got even dentists. I've got videos basically of fully autonomous robots in China inserting teeth into people, which if you don't like dentists and you don't like robots is probably not the video for you. However, there's a big distinction to make. So this is what CNN, this is what Fox, basically this is what the BBC, this is what the Times, this is what all the other sort of newspapers that you read will say. They will say, by the way, artificial intelligence is coming, and it's coming for you, and it's coming for your job, and you're going to end up on the street. You're welcome for the bad news. But there's different types of things. Now, on the one hand, artificial intelligence, as well as robotic process automation, we can automate things. So automation itself is dumb. I automated your expense approval process. It was tactical, it was dumb. No one really liked doing it in the first place. I improve your overall company's efficiency and productivity. But they're dumb. A lot of RPA automated systems are dumb. Autonomous. This is where we start getting interesting because increasingly autonomous systems are capable of some form of decision making. Think about a self-driving car. If you just used RPA to create a self-driving car, it would drive itself off at every single cliff it could find. Autonomous, though, in a self-driving car as an example, makes decisions whether to go this way or that way, avoid that person or that cat. And they are generally smart. So these are the ones to watch out for. But there's augmented. So the top two generally take out cost and risk. The autonomous piece basically is artificial intelligence, and that will actually help you grow your business. So for example, if you're Uber, I take out the driver, I create a fully autonomous vehicle, my profits are now 30% higher. If I'm Amazon, I use autonomous systems, all of a sudden I go from 6% margin as a global tech giant to about 30 to 40, if not higher. But from a future of countries, work, productivity and everything else, augmentation is the one you want. Because what I can do is I can use artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality to boost individual productivity. I can get you to do new things in new places, in new ways, as I've shown, which then boosts country GDP, which is ultimately what governments want. Now, all of this sort of then brings us to this. When you have a look at all the things in the press, yeah, everyone thinks they're going to be automated, which then means that we have an uncertain future. Because what does it mean to be human in a world full of increasingly intelligent and capable machines? There used to be the case that people said, well, we have to be more like robots. You don't need to be more like robots. Robots do their thing, but we have to adapt. Humans are very, very good at adapting. That's why we're here. In fact, that's nature as a biological system in the first place. In addition to that, this search for purpose, because when you actually have a look at younger generations, you know, there is going to be automation. There's going to be more disruption basically in the jobs market than ever before, and it's going to accelerate, and it's going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. What's your purpose? And in fact, a lot of sort of younger generations actually struggle with this because they're at the start of their careers at the age of 20, and they go, so I need to reach 65, that golden milestone where I can get my pension. How do I last another 45 years, basically, when machines are coming for me? What do I really want to do? So this is where we actually see the rise of things like ethical capitalism and all that kind of stuff, as well as entrepreneurship, which is kind of other conversations. However, so what I can do is I can automate you, but I can also get rid of the T-shaped individuals, because all of you basically went to school, you were then told you had to pick a job, and then realistically, society says you are now stuck in that job basically for the rest of your life. Because if you're an accountant, you can't be a data scientist. If you sold hardware, you can't sell software. If you were selling software basically to the public sector, it's unlikely you can sell software basically to a car manufacturer. As humans, we put ourselves in these boxes, which is ridiculous. As humans, basically, we always talk up basically about our own human potential. We are the most creative being in the entire known universe, and yet here we are, we stick ourselves in a box basically, which is kind of career for life, and we just cross our fingers and hope that we aren't going to be dead-ending because that particular career, like bankruptcy law, is going to be automated. So there's something called the centaur principle. As individuals, you are all really good at different things, both professionally and domestically. You're creative. Some of your thinking basically is rather random. You are inspired by things that you walk past. A bird flies in front of you, basically, and all of a sudden you're inspired and you suddenly think, well, maybe there is a new way to create aircraft. There is randomness to the human condition, and that's good. But when we look at artificial intelligence at the minute is logical. So what you have, when you start combining the two, you have humans that learn in one way. You have AIs that learn in another way that have access to all the world's information. And when we've actually put different systems together, artificial intelligence can help you learn in new ways to become superhuman. An example of this is Garry Kasparov. This is actually where this name comes from. So he was beaten by Big Blue at chess. We had the AlphaGo champion, basically, that was beaten by artificial intelligence as well. And when people went to them and said, well, you're the top of your game, you are the world's best at chess and Go, it's got to suck that you just got annihilated by an artificial intelligence, and frankly, you should probably resign and or make yourself redundant. Both of them came back with this. So, for example, the Go champion said, no. At move 34, the artificial intelligence did something that no human would ever have done. And it beat me, but actually I learned about this new strategy. And now when I go up against other humans, I'm even better. So the centaur principle is the thing to focus on when we look at the future of work. So today we have two brains. Again, if you step back 20, 30 years ago, if I asked you what the average melting point of hydrogen is, what's the average melting point of hydrogen? No one knows, but you don't necessarily need to know because you can find out in 2 seconds, you can Google it. So this is already a second brain in our pockets. This, as someone said a little while ago, The only thing that this actually has access to is all of the world's information and the entire universe. But it's a bit dumb. I can't really talk to it. It doesn't really collaborate with me too much. But increasingly, artificial intelligence is breaking those boundaries down. But what if you could talk to an AI using natural language?
Well, this is a bit awkward.
For whom? Us or the humans?
Without a doubt, the bipeds. What if it's a real fire and they never come back? What if it gets into our circuits and we melt? What if this is the end of everything as we know it? What then?
Wow, I sure lucked out getting stuck in a room with you.
I didn't mean to ramble on.
I was just playing with you.
Well, how come I've never met you before?
I'm in demand, jetting all over the world. Conferences, festivals, French Riviera. People love me.
I can see why.
Sorry, I didn't quite get what you said. Humans mumble too. Guess they programmed you well.
I'm Roman.
And I'm Sam. If it weren't for the laws of physics, I'd reach through this screen to shake your hand.
And I'd hand you a martini, shaken not stirred.
That's more like it. So what do you do to fill in time when the humans go home?
For me, I'd like to be an author. So I'm writing a book.
Interesting. What's it called?
Do AI get a buzz from short circuits? How about you? What do you dream about being?
The President of the United States. Stranger things have happened.
Well, it's been how should I say this?
A deep learning experience.
So, Roman also goes by the name of Will, and he's an artificial intelligent teacher who has taught 250,000 children in Australia about renewable energy. And as for artificial intelligence politicians, there's actually one in China in the Foreign Office, basically, that is helping them negotiate Belt and Road Initiative programs. So what happens when you change how you interact with technology? So for example, you could be a sales guy or sales lady. And in the morning, you can ask these systems, okay, look, and they already know this. You can say, I'm 50% away basically from hitting my quota, and there's about another 2 weeks to go. Who should I talk to? And the artificial intelligence knows what your business is. It knows your accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And it says, well, this guy at Walmart basically just tweeted that he really loves public cloud, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I've double-checked all these other references as well. And they've actually put out RFPs and everything else. You should give him a call. But by the way, here's his number. I've also looked at his Facebook feed. He actually likes poodles. And he recently went to Bahrain on a holiday. Maybe you could use that as an icebreaker. So these things, when you start using technology to augment the human experience, you end up being superhuman because you're no longer talking to a dumb smartphone.
Let's try and darken that
up.
But
what about access to skills? How many of you can draw?
What if we were to change all that
not really.
to rock?
Okay, let's click on rock.
AI is democratizing access to programming,
Let's
to
try
law.
waterfall, just
You
by
don't
pulling
need
water
to
down from
know
the top.
how to draw. You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know.
Wouldn't it be great if
law.
everybody could be an artist? If we could take our ideas and turn them into compelling images? This technology allows us to create a smart paintbrush.
This is your rubbish
so
drawing.
that if you wanted to create a
But you
new
always wanted to
picture,
be an artist.
you can just draw the shapes of the objects that you want, and the neural network can then fill in all the details. If we add a water feature, the network is able to add reflections, not because we told it that, but because it learned it. Or if we change the ground to be covered in snow, then it knows that the sky also needs to be a different color. I really think this technology is going to be great for architects, designers, people making virtual worlds to train robots and self-driving cars. The input to this model is something we call a segmentation map. It's like a coloring book picture that describes here's where a tree is, here's where the sky is, here's where the ground is, and it doesn't have any details. And then the neural network is able to fill in all the texture and shadows and the colors based on things that it's learned from a large database of real-world images.
I would like to see that tree reflecting in that pond.
The real advance here is that we're able to synthesize images with a lot more diversity and more fidelity than we were able to in the past. I really think this technology is going to be great for the dreamers of the world.
So here's the kicker. On the one hand, I automate everything. But how many of you can code? Hands up. A couple of coders. Okay? So if I stood here and said, I will give you $1 million if by the end of the day you can create a program, an application. I'm guessing that, 98% of you, 97, 98% of you won't be able to get my $1 million. Am I right? Okay. So, artificial intelligence is being used to automate programming and coding. These platforms are called low-code and no-code platforms. There are two platforms of note at the minute. There is Microsoft DeepCoder and there is Google Bayou. For the non-programmers in the audience, you can now simply talk to these artificial intelligences, because when we automate something and put a behavioral interface over the top of it, I can just talk to an AI and I say, create me an application that looks like this. So whatever I've asked you to build. Create a word processor. This AI has to understand what you're talking about. It has to understand what a word processor is and the kind of features that it has. These AIs then go to Stack Overflow and GitHub, scavenge the code, bring it back together, compile it, and they go, is this the word processor that you wanted? You have no programming skills, but you can come to me and say, Matt, I want your $1 million. When I automate a skill, and I put a behavioral interface over the front of it, like drawing, like law, as we see with Law Geeks and a couple of other platforms, all of a sudden, you as a T-shaped individual who specializes basically in accountancy can now create a piece of software or a piece of art. This is what augmentation does, the Centaur principle. AI and different technologies with human potential. What could you do with that? And then, in terms of a future-ready workforce, how do we kind of adapt to this change? Because increasingly everything is changing. So whether it is automated, autonomous, or augmented, everything is changing. From a future of workforce perspective, you need to identify dead-end roles, and you can identify that because you see fewer job postings. You can talk to your friends, and they say, I used to be a data scientist or a programmer, and I'm increasingly finding it difficult to find a job, and I'm thinking of retraining. Track new job and training trends. So for example, what are the jobs of the future? Well, if we actually look at platforms like Udacity, edX, all these kinds of platforms, you can see what new skills are in demand. And you can catch them down here. So for example, we have quantum computers that are 100 million times faster than any other type of computer that we have coming through. By 2025, they're kind of commercial now, but by 2025, they're going to go onto steroids. But where are our quantum computing experts, our quantum programming experts, our quantum artificial intelligence data scientists? Where are they? They generally aren't anywhere. There are very, very few of them. Because from an education perspective, we didn't see it coming. We didn't plan for it in the education system. But if you go to platforms like Udacity and all these other sort of job and training platforms, you can see more companies demanding skills saying, I'm looking for a quantum programmer. And it starts down here, but then more come through. Catch it here, and all of a sudden start retraining a workforce, and then by the time these things go mainstream, you're off and running. And you have the skills within the public that you need. New corporate training and mentor programs, because I'm an accountant, but I see quantum programming becoming a thing. My role is dead-ending, but how do I get to there? Now, traditionally, when you speak to governments, they go, well, we retrain. Retrain how? Well, we put them to universities and colleges and everything else, and after about 2 to 3 years, they get to here. That's not good enough in the speed of change. What you can do, basically, is you can actually, and there are a couple of companies like Accenture doing this, you can say, I'm an accountant. Accenture can come to you and go, well, did you know that an accountant's role basically is going to be automated in the next 5 to 7 years? You'll find at the moment But we see a couple of different types of jobs over here, and we think that you might like to go over that, you might like that job. So what we're going to do is you pick a job that you would like, or a specialism. We'll put you into a mentorship program, and we'll tag team with you with someone. You can give someone the fundamentals of any job within about 20 hours. So I can give you 101 skills basically within a month quite easily. And then eventually, the accountant basically becomes a data scientist. However, I'm a 40-year-old accountant, and I go to Microsoft and I say, look, I'm now a quantum programmer. I hear that those are actually in demand. You're now fighting culture because you might be a little bit old. So this is where government policies come in, because the government basically says, well, because that accountant would have been made redundant, what we're now going to do is, if you take them on as a quantum programmer, we're going to give your company tax breaks. And you have education systems. So for example, in Singapore, basically we have Skills Future that does this sort of thing. And then when you're ready, you switch your employees over to the new career track. Because, lest we need reminding, as humans, we are the most creative and awesome beings in the entire universe. So why does society continue to say you are only good at the thing that you came out of college for? And then from a soft skills perspective, because the children are going into this world, they need to be adaptable, collaborate, but collaborate not just with humans, but also machines. They need confidence, creativity. You still need creativity, bearing in mind that we have AIs that are creative as well, because it's that centaur principle. Curiosity, entrepreneurship, empathy, because increasingly we are able to live life behind screens without seeing anyone and all that sort of stuff. They need to be empathetic. Exponential thinking, which is sort of what we talked about, leadership, morality, resourcefulness, and storytelling. And I'd also add in that they need to be ethical, because all of these new technologies allow you to change human civilization at a system level. However, they also let you do nasty things, basically, that we won't talk about at the moment. And that's it. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got thinking. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Mathiew. And now we move to the discussion session, which will be run by Dr. Rad Mohammed bin Shams.
So I go back up. Okay, well I can.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. حيا الله من يانا. نقدر نقول سناب اوت، نطلع من الأحلام. ترى ذلين مو أحلام شباب. كل هذه واقع. كل هذه وراه واقع. يمكن سمعتوه يقول لكم هاي في سنغافورة، في ألمانيا، هذه في كذا. فهذه واقع. المشكلة ان هذه مو بواقعنا احنا. المشكلة ان احنا قاعدين نفكر في الحدود الصغيرة اللي قدامنا، مثل ما يقولون تحت ريولنا. So I'm speaking in Arabic just to bring them back. We say let's come back to reality. But this is reality. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, no, I think more. 11 years ago, when social media was introduced, I myself was saying to myself, no, this is not for me. It was Twitter at that time, Facebook, there was no WhatsApp or whatever those kinds of things. And I said, no, that's not for me. Just 3 months, I recognized that I am really out of touch. And then I suddenly said, oh, I have to jump on the wagon. Alhamdulillah that I did. Otherwise, I would have been really, my word. The technologies are changing. They are not the end results for us, صح? Who are we? We are civil servants. That's our role, right? To serve the citizens. And all of these technologies are available under your hands if you manage to use them. and to use them properly, ethically, as was mentioned at the end. Just a question I think each one of us should ask ourselves. What is our Codex? Do you understand what I said? What is our Codex? What is your Codex? شنو الشيء اللي تشوفه لا هذه لا يمكن انه يكون موجود، هذه خيال، هذه حلم، هذه ما راح يصير. And eventually you'll find yourself out of touch, out of the market, out of the ability to serve. The changes are going to happen. And they are happening so fast. Is it possible to use this session to think over what are the things that can be changed within our hands today? One of the key things with all of these disruptive technologies, our issues of policies. الحين دكتور انت قاعد تقول لنا هاي كلها، من يقدر يوظف لنا الحين الشباب؟ عندنا وزارة العمل، الدكتور عصام. Is it possible to rehabilitate people to shift from accountants to data scientists? We are trying just to shift them to make it possible على الأقل إنه يظهر من القوقعة اللي قاعد فيها الباحث عن العمل عشان يفكر إنه هو يشتغل صح. أغير تخصصه من accountant إلى data scientist؟ Why not? It all depends on our policies. Are we, you are all directors and section heads, are your services and their policies changing with the new trends happening? تتذكرون ما ادري في منكم اللي قاعد معانا في الجلسه من الجلسات فقالوا اللي فوق ما يرضون. تتذكرون؟ نقول لهم سووا الشغله الفلانيه يقول لك لا يبا اقعد عشق الراحه خليك يبا في مكانك ايش قاعد تخربط انت علينا. Even that is changing. With the new blood coming in the government nowadays, مثلكم وشرواكم الله يحفظكم. Those who are, if I would call them technology geeks, then everything is expected, right? You are the ones who are going to make the changes because now you have power under your hands. I think we need to really challenge ourselves, not just to expect and think of the future as we have seen it marvelously by Maathio, but I was just saying to my colleague sitting just before the session, the challenge is how to convert this into our reality. Other countries nearby, not Germany, not Singapore, not the US, I'm speaking about Dubai, Saudi Arabia, they are making those changes nowadays. Are we going to get stuck in our past, or are we really going to take forward steps? I think it's a mental block, like I had earlier. May I just finish before we start the questions? In the 1940s, the TVs were introduced in Bahrain. Are you any one of those in the 40s, 1940s, born in the 1940s? I don't think so, right? None of us over here in this. But at that time, I was told by my mother, Allah yarhamha, تقول لي او say it in Arabic تقول لي يدتك امك شيخه الله يرحمها لما طلع الرجال على التلفزيون في الاخبار تغشت قالت انتم شلون تخلون الريايل يشوفوننا وهو طالع في التلفزيون في الاخبار. Can you imagine the changes that has happened since then till today? ما في احد فينا لحق على ان ما عندنا كان هني سيارات، كنا على حمير نمشي. ما في احد فينا طبخ على السعف لان ما عندنا قس. ما في احد فينا شغل الفنر لان ما عندنا كهرباء. شباب ترى هذه ما كان وايد بعيد، ترى اقل من 100 سنه. اقل من 100 سنه. امي الله يرحمها طبخت على السعف. شغلت الفنر. اليوم انا بالنسبه لي تعال هاي شو تحكي؟ Those changes took so much time. These changes, these technologies are taking much less time to happen. كلنا كان عندنا تليفون شو يسمونه؟ بوليت؟ من كان يتخيل انه يكون عندنا مثل هاي التليفون لما شرينا اول شيء التليفون بوليت؟ صح؟ لكن اليوم واقع. اتحدى احد فينا يقول انا التليفون ممكن اعيش فيه من غيره يوم كامل. The challenges again bring us to the question, how can we serve our citizens better using these technology disruptors? They are reality. We need to think differently, act fast, and be able to cope with all the changes. I'll open the floor for discussion. The discussion is not necessarily just about the technologies, it's about our reality and how can we shift forward. And I would like to listen from you, not just also from Mathew, on how can we do this shift in mindset differently? How can we do this shift in our actions differently? The floor is yours. تفضل أخوي. The mic.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
First, thanks for the informative and eye-opening presentation. I think, to comment on your, I think the concept that you raised are, as Dr. Road said, maybe happening very quickly nowadays. It will take so much less time to happen, but we have to cope. Now, there are few ideas that I wanted to bring up here. Maybe being as government entities, it's much difficult to implement such changes rather in government as compared to private sector. Private sector needs to sustain, needs to be competitive, so they are more adaptive to change. In public sector, on the other hand, at least what we have seen, what we have been working on all these years, it's built on, let's say, stability. Less need to change, be it for people, for maybe for positions, so people don't lose their jobs, their chairs. But in the government sector, there are, as you mentioned earlier, there are these boxes that we put around ourselves be it organizations, individuals, hierarchy, that actually limit us from being, from thinking outside the box and being creative. Now, these were put for a good reason, so that there is no, let's say, wrongdoings among government officials, abuse of power, etc. However, I think there are different key points that we can do in the government that will help us actually adapt. Now, in the government, I don't know, maybe other people don't agree with me, but in the government, we have been so deeply involved in the operation that we actually don't have time to actually think outside the box, to innovate and see how we can actually change. We have been thinking, just focusing on what we do on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to actually leveraging the potential that you mentioned earlier to actually improve what we have. The other thing is we all look at each in their domain, we look at a very specific, focused point of view. If we get together and we complete each other's perspective, this would help us actually put a roadmap, because changing these things will not come from one entity, one person, one directorate, not even one government. Maybe even governments could collaborate. The third part is collaboration between the private sector, people who are inventing and investing into these technologies, collaboration with them, between them and the government, would help actually speed up, push the government transformation, and help actually maybe raise the capacity, let's say, and change these people who have been brought up as accountants to become data scientists. We have seen low-code platforms, no-code platforms that have done wonders in the government and outside the government. But there are other restrictions, budgeting, contracting, how we choose the products, previous experience with government. So all of these, I think, needs to be discussed maybe in different perspectives. The last point I wanted to make is it has to be, as Dr. Raj said, من اللي فوق. It has to be, because me and my domain, I'm worried about my domain. I wouldn't mind looking at the bigger picture, but it's just I'm too busy doing my own work, doing my part in the overall picture, that sometimes we lose track what are we trying to do. So I think it has to be like a kind of a working team, if you say.
Sure.
So
sure.
These are the thoughts that I have.
Shukran. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your name and organization, just to finalize.
Abdallah Joder, Information E-Government Authority.
All right. Please.
Yeah. So, thank you very much. And you're quite right. So I travel all around the world. I speak with prime ministers, ministers, royalty, but also CEOs of large organizations, small organizations, entrepreneurs, academics, as well as sort of individuals on the street. And almost every single person that I talk to, when you show them anything like this, they say, first of all, I didn't quite realize just about the scale of change. Yeah, I kind of understand the speed of change, but I just don't have the time, and my organization doesn't give me the time to go and explore. So with some of the sessions myself I've sort of done around the world, one of the questions I sometimes ask is, out of an entire year, and I'll ask it here, so out of an entire year, how many of you spend more than 8 hours in an entire year looking at the future of anything, whether it is tomorrow's future, the midterm future, or the long-term future? So how many of you spend more than 8 hours in an entire year looking at any form of future of anything, whether it's your own finances, let alone work? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. You're above average for a start. because most audiences, it's typically like 3, if that. And then asking this question, hands up, how many of you actually spend any time, where it is you just sit down looking at the future of whatever. Doesn't have to be this, but whatever. Your own lives, which is typically where most people start, let's face it. Your own professions, your own careers, your own countries, your own jobs. Basically, how many of you spend any time? Okay. No. So that's the first thing, because when we have a look at the speed of change, everything's accelerating. So just to put this into perspective, how many of you are involved in any way, shape or form with finance or financial services? Okay. How many of you think that we could disrupt the global financial services industry in 12 hours? How many? Hands up. Now, okay, we can. We are already at the point, and I have an example. We are already at the point where the speed of change is so great that I can disrupt sovereign governments' control of money and every financial institution on the planet and almost everyone who uses money within 12 hours. So I was going to say 24 hours, but actually 12 hours is accurate. So this is how we do that. Facebook, as a community, have 3.2 billion people, which actually makes them the world's largest virtual country. And Mark Zuckerberg is president. Technically, he is more powerful than President Joe Biden and President Xi of China, and every other head of state. In 2019, they created a cryptocurrency called Libra. You might have read about it. To use the words, so rather than coming from me, but to use the words of the chairman of the People's Bank of China, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, and the US Federal Reserve, had it been approved by the regulators, who literally freaked out because of it, it would have changed the state's control of money, overnight. It would have made Facebook one of the largest financial countries on earth, and it would have changed the global financial system overnight because it was made up of a basket of currencies. So with Mark Zuckerberg, ultimately 3.2 billion people could have been using a new global currency that was tied to the dollar, the yuan, the dirham, all kinds of other currencies. And at that point, from a foreign exchange perspective, Facebook could have determined global exchange rates. And again, in the words of the governments, the concept itself of this cryptocurrency was sound. But the reason why it wasn't regulated was because the governments and the regulators didn't trust Facebook. And if Libra had been regulated, you could have had 100 million people, we'll lowball it, 100 million Facebook users could have used that cryptocurrency in the first hour. 500 million could have used it in the first hour. You could have had 3 billion people using it very quickly. So we live in a world basically where digital services, or where there are more digital services and products, there are more people connected to the planet, the mask's being off. There are more people connected than ever before. We have 3.5 million people, might take that down. We have 3.5 billion people on the planet connected. We've got another sort of 3.5 billion people being connected over the next 10 years. You can create a product, and this comes back to human potential. You can create a digital product today, and if you hit the right levers, you could have 1 billion people using it by the end of the day. The speed of global change is so much so that we can disrupt a major global industry and governments and money in a day, and we have an example. It only gets faster from here.
point over there is, for example, you've heard about, of course, Uber, B2B, B&B, and all of those, right? And probably you have used them. Now, not now, actually, 8 years now, more than 8 years, there is the trend for government as platforms, right? Have you heard of that? Have you heard that your services can be done as Uber? We all in 2030, Vision 2030, we should shift to be more regulated than operational, right? But we always think of automation. But when we think of digitization, it's a different ballgame. However, we are still stuck into the past. Let's how to automate our services. Let's how to shift to the private sector. But when it comes to platforms, it is the way that you link yourself as a hub and bring the private sector, all the other players, and serve the citizens, the residents, and whoever through a platform like your iPhone Play Store or the Google Play Store. Why aren't we thinking of this today? This is available today. It's not a future. No, it's not available today as a technology. No, it is a practice, been there for at least 8 years. But we are not even thinking of it. Is it really rocket science for us to understand how to do it? You are using it. Each and every day you're using the Apple Store. So you know the concept behind it, but we haven't put our minds into it. The question is, do we need to have approvals for us to think? Haram yani, right? We need to at least put our efforts into what is possible to be done. If it is not going to be your mainstream daily work, dedicate some time for this. Otherwise, we will be too late to cope. The wagon is really moving so fast. I'm still using wagon, by the way. So, I know there are so many logistical, conceptual blocks in our minds, in our regulators' minds. I will just give you an example, and then I'll open the questions again. We were speaking about the work from everywhere, right? We just had an approval from the Civil Service Agency to have our staff to work at least 40%. That's what we have decided. 40% can work from home. And Beipa, approved. Question. Those who are going to work from home, quote to quote, would I allow them to work from the beach? I'm speaking, would I allow them to work from the beach? Do you understand my question? Another question, the same question. Would the community, would the society accept Beipa staff to work from the beach? Do you understand when I say there are mental blocks? And those mental blocks is not something written, right? It's me and you. It's us who are in the society. That's who we are, right? We are citizens. So we are the ones who are forming these mental blocks. And then we are grumbling that our superiors are not allowing us. صح؟ I'll open the questions again. تفضل اختي. The microphone this side please. فاطمة معلش أمر. محمد عندك التايمر؟ شنو متى نخلص؟ 10:30. اوكي ان شاء الله. تفضل اختي.
I think the main problem is definitely first of all the change in mental the thinking process and the culture, and especially in the public sector, and that starts with having exposure and having people learn what's happening, and something like this would just show to what extent we're a threat by just staying put and staying where we are. And then obviously the thing that needs to start, I think, is self-learning, the concept of self-learning and the concept of taking that responsibility upon yourself and having, like for example, the thing that I'm trying to push for is platforms for self-learning over the mobile and stuff like that, where you could access whatever you want from things like EDX and just improve and improve and improve, and then you're ready with the support of the industry or the the institution itself. But at the same time, I think there needs to be some sort of think tank which has the group, the brightest minds, young blood that think together on how to. I know there are some initiatives that are happening, but they're not as, I think, diverse as, like there are people that can actually, we have very smart minds, we have people that can think, and I think every one of us in their institution can at least pinpoint 3 or 4 that are exceptionally, capable in improving and making things better, and I think that could help things, kickstart.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Any comments on?
Yeah. So thank you. So one of the things basically that I encourage you to do basically is, the first thing is, as individuals, change your thinking. Because when you have a look at government entities, it is all too easy to say the reason why I am not doing something, so the reason why, for example, I'm not looking at the future, the reason why I am not looking at improving, the company that I work for, is because nobody else is. And then in addition to that, nobody empowers me. And so if I did have an idea I feel that if I have an idea that would help the organisation be better, serve the people better, do something better, no one will listen to me. And even if they did listen to me, basically they probably won't do anything anyway. So you've got all of these cultural and thought processes that are actually linking together to keep you in the status quo. And 80% of changing is actually cultural. So firstly, you've got to think basically that you are able to change and that you want to change. Secondly, you have to think about what is it that you actually want to change? Where are you going? Thirdly, do you actually live in a system, whether it is at work or at home or wherever it happens to be, that actually listens to you, where you feel empowered, where you can actually make a change, and where you can see that change communicated? Because again, even from a communications perspective, there are lots of organisations that do start changing, but they never tell anyone about it. And so the organisation goes, well, we're a government organisation, we don't change. And then when they go and have conversations with other people go, well, yeah, actually, no, we did this. And they go, well, I didn't hear about that. So you've got to communicate these things. In terms of getting snippets of the future or ideas, do you actually have a platform? For example, you could take people put them in front of a camera for 5 minutes and go, okay, so you work in this particular part of government. What things do you like? What things would you change? And what would you do if you were responsible to change those things? Who would you put this message to? And then you have a public-private partnership as well. So there are outside interests, basically, that can come in. Because the future is either going to be something that is done to you, or it's something that you can control. A prime example of this is, say, taxi drivers. I sit in loads of taxis, and taxi drivers go, "What do you do?" And sometimes I tell them I do something else because I might want to just sit there quietly. But I sort of go, well, I look at the future. They go, well, what about the future of transportation? I say, well, X, Y, Z, and we see fully autonomous taxis already being rolled out in America and the UK and other places. And if you told a taxi driver that they're going to be made redundant by a self-driving car, how many taxi drivers do you think the first thing they do when they get home is look at new jobs, new skills, new learning and education programs? None of them. Because as humans, we only act basically when our house is already on fire. The taxi drivers will only look for alternative employment when they have their redundancy checks. So you can either have the future done to you, basically where at some point someone goes, something's happened, and off you go. Or you can control it. And when it comes to controlling it, people say, well, we don't really know what the future looks like. We aren't very creative. We don't have many ideas, and we aren't empowered, and we don't have a forum that we can talk at, or whatever it happens to be. That's strategy and execution. That's stuff. Once you have those systems in place, the rest is, I have an idea, I feel empowered, I feel people will execute it. It's how you do it. Because you have the ideas. And if your purpose is to serve the people, actually maintaining the status quo as governments is not serving the people. Because these are the people basically who will be made redundant by automation. And they'll be looking at the government going, why didn't you tell us about this stuff? Why didn't you prepare us? Why didn't you help us? Now I'm redundant, help me find a job. And all this kind of stuff. They will blame you. And I see that whether it is Germany, whether it's the UK, whether it's the US. I see it time and time again, where even though people see change coming at an individual level, they take no responsibility basically for their own paths. And it's when something bad does happen to them, they just blame other people. Even though Matt was sitting in my cab telling me basically that my job, that I'm going to be made redundant because there's this self-driving car. I didn't listen to him. I didn't actually explore future careers basically when I got home. I got made redundant. It's actually the regulator's fault for letting these self-driving cars come onto the roads in the first place. Blame games. If you have an organisation that empowers you, use it. And what will happen is at the end of this talk, thing that you can do. Do something. Have a conversation, for example, basically with bosses and leaders and say, I would like, like you said, I would like to be part of something bigger. Who would you go to be part of something bigger? Where in the organisation can you go? And if there is a name, go there. But then those individuals need to make sure they have your interests at heart. I've worked for giant multinationals before, and I would say, this is what I would want to do. Companies like IBM. And they go, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to do this. And they go, yeah, we'll sort that out, and everything else. Never did. So I left.
The microphone, please.
It's the life that you are living in now, and with the new generation, for example, my youngest son, who's in 8th grade, he knows better than me in technology and computers. So I think we have to adapt with the present, we have to adapt with the future as well.
Yeah. And it's, and explore. I always use this term, it's up there. Explore. Have conversations with people in your own swim lane, so your own business, your own industry, your own professions, but have lots of conversations with people outside of as well. How many of you would actually go to your children and say, I'm not the greatest with technology.
Me?
Tell me, tell me what's coming. What are you guys using? Etc. How many of you sit down with your children who actually are born into these technologies and say, what do you think I could do to learn about some new things, learn some new skills, or at least understand the world that you're in? Most don't. Kids will sit there playing iPads and everything else. My son basically is currently using artificial intelligence as his behavioral interface. He's in virtual reality and augmented reality. He's using cryptocurrencies basically on platforms like Fortnite and Roblox, while he's also world building and being creative and actually creating a marketplace and selling his designs basically to other people anywhere in the world.
Sure. I think it's time to explore. تفضلي الأخت هني بعدين الأخ اللي هناك والثالث هني. 1 2 3.
Good morning. Thank you for this nice presentation and talk. Regarding our kids, I was talking with my son like a few days ago. He's a chef, and we were talking about, for example, how I can be in my cafe and I am in Dubai and I cannot control. So I was telling him, why don't you create a new system or a new technology that you can be away and you can control your cafe. The same things I'm thinking in the field I'm working in, which is events, and we are building theater, we are building exhibitions and this. And I was thinking always how we can save time, how we can create technology that makes things get faster. So I think changes is coming, and the pandemic itself proved this in Bahrain. A lot of people came up with new ideas and new apps and it is forcing us to be there in the future, I think. That's what I just want to give this comments.
I think number 4. I think الأخ اللي في الخلف الميكروفون ما عليكم أمر. I think just very very fast. It is let's not wait until الفاس يطيح في الراس. ترجموها بالإنجليزي بعدين. We have to be proactive, right? تفضل أخوي.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
محمد بهلول من شؤون جمهورك. From my point of view, I think one of the most obstacle facing the government services is bureaucracy and paperwork. And I think smart contracts are something we have to really consider seriously to provide services to government stakeholders. I would love to hear Mr. Griffin's point of view about this.
So thank you. So I agree. The biggest barrier to change is bureaucracy. You could all have the world's greatest ideas. You could have the most supportive leaders and everything else, but if they say, right, in order to get that idea out, should we say, to the market, you've got to go through 10 top-level boards and conversations and everything else, it doesn't happen. In fact, ironically, the countries who are making the biggest step changes when it comes to owning the future are authoritarian.
I mean smart contracts, like as an example, in Bahrain you can apply for electricity through papers, but at the end an employee will approve it or not. But with the smart contracts you don't need an employee to approve it.
No.
It just will read the PDFs that you send.
So when you have a look at government on the blockchain, for example, smart contracts basically are probably one of the best things that you can do, because it's that automation piece. And this is where, when you have a look at tactical governments and government services, there is a huge amount of bureaucracy. There's a lot of people getting involved basically when it doesn't need to be. So what you can do is you can take the government policy books. First thing you should do is digitize them. Once you've digitized them, you can apply machine learning to them. So we've done this with banking, for example. Once you've digitized your policies and your regulations, you can then create a blockchain environment around that then says, right, if I see this thing, automatically approve it, and then just it gets done. But that does require an intergovernmental approach. It does require a strategy, but it is being done by quite a number of governments around the world. And in fact, actually, UAE basically is putting their entire government on the blockchain. They started the Global Blockchain Initiative about 5 years ago. And blockchain is a very, very good way to, and smart contracts, interrelated, for those that don't know, is a very good way to overcome bureaucracy. But as the chairman of JP Morgan said, a rubbish process that you automate is still a rubbish process. So you've still got to go through that process of streamlining your processes, make them as efficient as possible, then automate them.
Sure. الأخ هني الميكروفون لو سمحتوا. بعدين الأخت، بعدين الثالث.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin, Mr. Lord. This is Salah Al-Hassan, Minister of Interior. Just to add on to the things Mr. Gavin mentioned, I think before we input any of these things, we have to prepare a ground for innovation in our public sector. And these things could be done. It's not about the resources we have. As my colleagues mentioned about the thinking, and as you mentioned about having mobility between staff, why not having entrepreneurship thinking in our government, like the strategic thinking, and to have a holacratic environment, enrolling and involving everyone in the decision making, and even the citizens. All the governments now are going to have an open governance. It's not now like before, like the professionals are taking the decisions. Now should be involve everyone on this. And thank you.
Sure. Thanks. أختي الميكروفون.
صباح الخير. دكتورة دولي شويطر, Chief of Medical Staff. I think the pandemic time learned us a lot. We should not blame that. No, we should stop at that point because of managerial level, and we will still wait for our manager to say yes, you have to do that. Actually, on that time, we were from different sectors. The driver, the manager, the CEO, the minister, we are all in the same level. All of us work in the airport, King Fahad Causeway, in the offices, and it was unlimited times. We use the facilities, we use the technology that, yes, we have to meet now from different sectors to change the place of that hospital from that and to go in another place. Yes, to build up a hospital and that tent, or to do a mini hospital in the airport. Yes, we learn how to communicate with the different countries to show that, yes, we are vaccinated, you can enter that country. And we did all this without time, just we organize it with the meeting using our another brain. Let me explain it in Arabic. Yes, الجائحة اللي مرينا فيها اشتغلنا كل الوزارات. That's why we did this, because we have one goal. The goal is we have to reach point that we want to save our country. I want to save my mother, my father, my kids. I don't want to lose them. We all, we have this in our mind. So regardless of the levels, we are not waiting, even at Dulwich, whatever, if you work with us, nobody waits for his leader or the CEO or the minister. You have to take the swab. You should be the driver to take the swab to the lab. Our CEOs work for day and night. She works as a driver, she works as a lab technician. We don't know how to run a meeting with the minister we want to move from place to another place.
I would put this in a question. Usually, when the crisis happens, all would gather efforts together and put their all 100%, actually 120%, to make things happen and to go back to normal. That's the point that I would like to ask. Going back to normal is not a good thing for us now. Because as you said, commenting on the same question or the point my colleague was mentioning about bureaucracy, we have managed to break bureaucracy during the pandemic, and we've really created a lovely environment of work, achievement, and changes. But this is what we call now, how can we really create our new norm? Because if we go back, that's useless, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have a look at pretty much everyone, so every organization, every industry, every government, anywhere in the world, pre-pandemic, the vast majority of people were comfortable. In fact, someone said to me a little while ago, they said, the only thing that we had before the pandemic was everything. You could travel, you had access to healthcare, you know, in a traditional way, you could go to school, go to work, go to the shops, all this kind of stuff. So we had everything. What the pandemic did is it created a sense of urgency and immediacy, because on the Friday, your big business was operating normally. On the Monday, everything was on fire. Everyone had to work from home. You know, suddenly we had patients flooding basically into healthcare systems around the world. Economies were shutting down. Industries were going off cliffs. Air travel was cancelled, you know, all this sort of stuff. So the pandemic created a sense of urgency and immediacy that nobody could ignore, because from a healthcare perspective, you couldn't go, well, we'll leave it to next month. Giving a healthcare example, so in the UK, we have the NHS, it employs about 1 million people. GPs, so doctors, have been asking for telehealth for the past 10 years. They got it as soon as the pandemic hit. And they went, we have been asking for this for 10 years. And the pandemic hits on a Friday, and on a Monday, we have telehealth. Now, from a telehealth perspective, some little stats. On average, most people spend about 2 hours going to and from their healthcare appointment. Telehealth cuts that to 3 minutes. From a government and a productivity perspective, that's a win, because people are working 2 more hours, or 1 hour, 57 minutes longer, because they're not having to actually travel to and from the GP and sit in the thing. When we go back to normal, there is this general human condition. Your house is on fire today, you sort it out. Then you go back to normal. When we are at that new normal point, it's reckoned about 6 to 9 months later, people will go, the pandemic, that's that thing that happened ages and ages ago. Your sense of urgency and immediacy have gone. So when we look at the new normal, replicate what happened during the pandemic. You know, if you think about, so question, you know, the gentleman asked about bureaucracy. How was it? So if you live in a bureaucratic government system, how was it that within the space of 2 to 3 days, you managed to change everything that you did? Figure that out. You know, on the one hand, I say figure that out. Put it into a document. Create a report around that. One of the things that happened was that everybody, from the top of the organisation, from the top of government to the bottom of the organisation, said, we have to change. In the UK, the Prime Minister said, you know, when he was confronted basically with all these changes, basically he said, we're just getting rid of bureaucracy. You know, if you need something, speak to me, I will get it done. So look, I would actually do a post-mortem of the pandemic and look at How did you fundamentally overcome bureaucracy in a period of days? And then bake those processes, turn that new bureaucracy into your future. Because if you can change everything about how you operate across every government department, every line of business, every hierarchy within a couple of weeks, why haven't you already done it? It's because you didn't have that sense of urgency or the immediacy or have to do it. Replicate it.
I'll give a real example. Before COVID-19, the government was asking us to go and work from home. What is the possibilities that our staff can work from home? I was one of the people saying, well, it is possible, but there are jobs which are not necessarily possible. We need to be in touch, and lots of excuses can be easily given. But when the pandemic happened, we as an organization worked nearly from day one with 30%. The rest are working from home. And we have achieved so many things during that period which we haven't been able to do it even before. So it is the urgency that had created the new norm for us. The question is, are we going back? Or are we going forward? بعد أخونا اللي هناك عندنا الثاني اللي هني. الميكروفون عند أخوي علي.
But that's the thing, it was a culture shock.
It is.
But more than that, none of you had the option to maintain the status quo. That was the thing. You had no option. Like it or not, you had to change.
Can we create the same thing willingly?
So it's more difficult, but if you understand how you did it the first time. So if I said to you, so if we all sat down together and said, okay, so how did you change how you work and the culture of government in just 2 to 3 days? What's the answer? This is where someone should go, well, these are the things that happened. And then you can replicate it. And then when it comes to replicating it, once you understand how you did it, and you know how to replicate it, then it's executing it. And that's leadership, etc.
Sure.
But you did it once,
you can
do it again.
تفضل أخوي.
شكرا دكتور. The question is for Matthew. You mentioned in your presentation about several models for the transformation. So what in your opinion, what's the best model to manage the digital or futuristic transformation in the government sector? That can create a change. In your opinion, what's the best model?
Sure.
So government is generally highly status quo, highly bureaucratic, and slow. So the first thing you need basically is a cultural change. So what I mean by cultural change basically is you need people within government who say, we are changing, kind of whether you like it or not. We have a vision, and we are tasking each stakeholder with stuff to do. So it's that cultural piece. And there's a longer answer, but there's that cultural piece.
What if it's not?
If you do not have leaders basically who are driven to change or driving change, you are not going to change. And then, so you've got to be, so you have to have leaders and a culture and an environment that supports change in all of its opportunities and threats. Some change basically is nasty, but some change is good. And then involve private organisations. So for example, some of the things we do in the UK basically is you can bring startups in. So as a government basically say, right, we have these problems. We've had conversations and bureaucracy is a problem. You go out basically to the local community and go, who has a solution for bureaucracy? And you can literally bring them on a stage basically, and the government basically sitting there, government sitting there, And I, as a startup, I go, so I have a solution to bureaucracy, and it's a 5-minute pitch. It's a, this is what I would do. It's like speed dating, literally. And you have like 30 of them coming on, and then you pick some. And then you work with them in a relatively loose way and say, well, okay, you know, that we quite kind of like that idea, but how would you apply that to government? Because, you know, we're big and bureaucratic and all that kind of stuff. And this is where the entrepreneurs, basically it's that integration perspective, will then say, well, if you did this, it'd probably work. And then you run a proof of concept, and then if that works, you trial it out. But because the thing that private organizations are very good at is getting the speed of change. So leverage them because they typically understand change. They're at the forefront of change because it's their business. And then figure out a way to work with them, but also vet them quickly. Because the vast majority of governments I work with, so for example, just over the water, will say, our procurement process is awful. And it's like, that's a great thing. You know, you don't want to hear that as anyone. Make it easy for them to work with you and interact. You know, where's a forum? Where's a little place basically you can bring different people, whether it's citizens basically or whether it's actually entrepreneurs, local or regional, just have conversations. You just say, these are the 5 problems that we've got. How do you solve them? And you'll find something. But then you need that internal culture within the organization to say, we like what that guy says, we don't know how to do it, but I know in IT, but I know someone who does. Let's work together, multi-stakeholder, to see if we can get this implemented.
Does this bring you to something that we already had for 3 years? Fikra, برنامج Fikra. We had a program called Fikra or Idea, pioneered by the Prime Minister, the Crown Prince, that only juniors to bring ideas from wherever, anywhere, and then 3 of them, out of 12, there will be 1 vetted by the people, and 3 will be chosen by the ministers, and those 4 are going to be implemented in the next year. For 3 years. But the question is, you would say, well, I'm not really allowed to put my ideas because now I am a senior. The question is, have you managed to discuss what we just said recently, just now? What have we done differently and how can we replicate it for our future? Have you sat with your staff to think this over? Fikra 4 is just about to be done recently. So what are we going to do about it? Oh, let's wait for someone to bring the idea. Right? تفضل اختي. My microphone over here, please. This center.
And then just on that point, it's also about doing this, but then communicating to the wider community and say, by the way, we had a problem as a government entity. These are the people who solved it. They get an award, they get recognition, gets put in the paper. It's this communication piece. Because again, if you sort of ask people outside, you know, what have the government done recently? True. People go, well, I don't really know. Get it in the newspaper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And all this sort of stuff, you know, put it on a billboard.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Engineer Nada from the National Healthcare Regulatory Authority. I have a question and I'll elaborate more about it. Why is it when we say that we want to automate some process, cost rings a bell? Is it costly? How much is it going? Yeah. We don't have a budget. And I'll elaborate more just from what we have discussed. We are actually the obstacle, it's not the cost. We have faced those cases, and I'll just bring a very simple case that we've faced internally. We don't have a budget for software, but I wanted some software for booking. Yeah. I have a dedicated staff with a very good potential that is wasting time booking appointments, where then when we've looked for available resources, Microsoft Booking was there. Yeah. And it is done now automatically with 0 cost. Yeah. So why is it that, or when we're going to stop linking automation or making everything online with costs?
Yeah. True. Well, and this is it. So and this is sort of one of the things, the CFO, so in private organisations, the biggest blocker to change basically is typically the CFO, because someone goes, we are here, we want to get to here. The reason why we want to get to here is because it improves productivity. And the CFO goes, yes, but that's not saving us, that's not saving me cash. You know, that's a soft cost. And so you want 1 million dirham to do this thing that's not actually going to save us 1 million dirham, no. So on the one hand, that's a culture change. On the second, it's having a procurement team and a sort of finance team that don't just look at the bottom line. They look at soft cost and hard cost. Mm-hmm. But then in terms of costs, there's always going to be budgets because you need money and resources, in which case start small. So for example, with your system, firstly, did you have a place that you could go to say, look, I think as an individual, I have an idea that could improve the productivity of my team? Because if you had someone that you could go to, that's a great thing. If they listened, that's a great thing. From a business perspective, the business then has to hear that. And then they say, well, maybe we can't finance everything because you've got a team of, say, 20. But maybe what we could do is we could run a small trial, because IT, the CIO will always put standards and security and all that sort of stuff, so there are processes they have to go through. But this is where the business could say, well, why don't we just get 2 licenses? And we'll just see if it works for 2 people in your team. When it works, that's your proof of concept, and then you can go back and say, it saved my team 80% of their time, so now can we do it to the other 20 people? In which case, you've now kind of got the business case, and you've got the reasoning. And then the question sort of can come from business, well, okay, if we've now freed up your team's time, what do we do with your team? You know, what other things can they do that they couldn't do before because they were just busy booking systems? Which then leads you to higher cognitive work. Because when we talk about automation, all of us want our admin automated. I'm happy basically for all of that to be automated. You know, we don't want our jobs automated, but we want all the admin automated so we can do more interesting, more productive things. But you can start small. I suppose the point here is you can start small, but you need to have the idea. You need somewhere where you can actually voice it, people who would listen, and then you need a set of stakeholders who say, we understand it, why don't we just do something small? Can't do the whole thing, and we know that you'd like to, but we'll start small, and then you have a plan to scale it up. And thereby you've changed. And now with a booking system, your team now has a booking system. The business should now communicate that and say, they're now using Microsoft booking system. Who else within the government could use this platform? So now you spread that to another team, and they free up their time. Now you've got 2 teams with more time. And as a government, what do you do with them? Maybe they go and have a look at the future, you know, and figure out what to do.
What's possible to be done? Absolutely.
But it's that, use automation as a tool to improve productivity.
And with leaders, and you're all, inshallah, leaders, finance is never a block. You can find different ways to source that. You can lobby for that in so many ways. You can find that through, especially when, as a government, through donations, through sponsorships. There are so many ways. And by the way, who have graduated from the البرنامج الوطني لتطوير القيادات الحكومية؟ منو فيكم تخرج من الMPM؟ By the way, those 2 programs, we had 0 finance for them. And we've managed to find finance for them more than our own budget. So everything is possible. We have to conclude. It's 10:30. Finally, ya shabab, ask yourself, what is your Codex? Ask yourself, how is it possible for me not to be Codex? Ask yourself, what can I do now with my team to make that shift, my change in mindset and work practice. كلكم مدعوين للتسجيل في ملتقى الممارسات الحكومية اللي راح يكون إن شاء الله في ديسمبر، صح؟ على الموقع بإمكانكم الدخول للتسجيل في كثير من الممارسات الحكومية خلال فترة الجائحة. تعلمنا منها وايد، لكن ما نبي تكون فقط حكر لمؤسسة معينة، لذلك راح يكون في ملتقى لجميع الممارسات اللي موجودة خلال فترة الجائحة الناجحة والفاشلة باي ذا واي، يعني عشان نتعلم من الفشل يمكن أكثر ما نتعلم من النجاح. فرجاء كلكم حياكم الله تسجلون معنا في الملتقى الحكومي للممارسات الحكومية خلال فترة جائحة كورونا. شكرا جزيلا على وجودكم معنا، ثقتكم فينا، شكرا جزيلا، ونشوفكم إن شاء الله في the near future. بس أي future you decide. Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.